Welcome to Step by Step, where we take a deeper look into specific steps in the decisions application. Today's video is going to be focused on the Get Property Names on Object step. This is a really neat step. What it does is it allows us to get a list of properties that are available to be used on any object that can get passed into it. So in this image here, for example, is an example of the folder entity getting put into the Get Property Names on Object step, and it outputs a list of all the possible folder properties that can be configured here. So things that could be passed into, like the folder behavior type or folder ID, and so on and so forth. Now, this is really useful because any case where you need to utilize or need to know what these properties are could become useful. Cases where you're utilizing integrations that have some kind of unstructured data, it may be useful to know, or you at least want to know what those properties might be if you're trying to understand them a little bit better. It could also be useful in cases where maybe you want to set up some kind of routing where you look at what the possible properties are and then change or route your project to do different things depending on those results. And so this is useful here in this type of example. A couple of the common errors that we are going to take a look at as well once we look at this in decisions is first of all how objects cannot be used with constants. And so that may be important to know, especially if you're just kind of doing some testing and getting an idea of how this works. And also the kind of classic, if you're missing inputs, how does this step behave with that? And how does this step interact with potential missing inputs? So we'll take a look at those when we jump over to decisions. So here in decisions, I've created a small flow that I'm going to use to demonstrate and kind of just test this out, see how this property and this specific step works. So first of all, if you want to find this, obviously you can search for it. So if you're looking at get property names on object, you can easily just grab this from the toolbox. If you're wondering where to find it from here, if you expand data and advanced, you have get property names on object available right here as well. So under data and advanced, you can find get property names on object, or obviously you can just search for it if you're looking for that particular step if you want to use it. So now looking at what I built here just to show you so you have an idea, and we'll take a look at how this works. We simply just have a create data step. This is what I'm doing just to create and set up the object that I want to pass into here. So here I just created a folder object. It's just a folder type. I just grabbed a folder from my designer project here, the flows folder, so that I can pass this in. Outputs in as folder object, which is just a folder. And then I'm taking that and I'm selecting from flow to pass that into my target in the get property names on object step. So it does expect an object, meaning that I can pass in other pieces of data. I can pass in folders, I can pass in user defined types, other created things, assignments, accounts, whatever it is, I can pass anything into this and it should work. You'll notice if I go to edit here, I don't see anything being grayed out, meaning that it doesn't match, when I'm looking at things. So I can pass in a string as the object if I really wanted to. But obviously, you're going to want to pass in something that has actual properties to really take a look at. And so that's why I'm passing in a folder here, for example. So let's go ahead and just run this. So my create data is just going to grab that specific folder with all of its details and output that. And it's going to send it into my get property names on object step. So here's the input with the folder. And then here you can see the output. It outputs just a list of strings. And those strings are the names of the possible properties that are available to be configured for a folder. And so I can see all of those available. And now I can do whatever it is that I want with that list of strings. So again, if you need to see it here, it's a list of strings with all whatever that specific object is that got passed in. And so I can use that here. And then from here, you're free to do what you want with it. Regardless of what you want to do with it, you can kind of adjust based on your needs. We know it's taking in a list, so maybe you want to use a for each on that list of things. You can take in the list of those strings and do something with that list. Check whatever the data is, check the properties, do something with the properties, create values on those properties. Whatever it is you want to do, you can for each and do that for each item of that list of strings. That's just one example. Maybe you want to route your flow with some kind of rule. You can simply take a rule, that's going to take in the list from these list of strings. Check the properties for some specific property. And if some property exists, take your flow down one way. If a different property exists, take your flow another way and kind of change different things from there. Similarly, if you want, you can even use this to have some kind of runtime option here. With runtime selection, you can have your routing pass in certain IDs and send those IDs with a runtime selection so that can run different flows based on different things. And so you can have a truth table to output different possible IDs or whatever that is and get the specific values and use runtime selection to run different flows based on the different properties that you have from some kind of objects that are coming from somewhere. So it's very important, very interesting and great ways to utilize the potential properties of some object to change what you have. Now, just a couple quick things to note just so we can talk about those errors that are possible. The first one being the obvious, what happens if I'm passing in data that doesn't exist or null data? So there's a lot of steps and decisions that if null data hits them, they'll just pass out null data back and it'll continue through the process without any issue. In this particular case, if I just set this to ignore and I have null data, it will not just pass on through, it does create an error. So any exception handling should catch this. I should be able to easily track this and kind of note, oh, whatever I passed in here is null, and so I need to maybe change that or adjust it. So if you need to make some changes or take a look at it, should be pretty clear, but it does kind of note, hey, there's an exception here, object reference not set to an object. And so you can kind of see that there was a problem with this, and that's because of this null data. If I look at it here, I can view it. This step is outputting nothing, so this step is taking in nothing. And it does create an error, so you don't have to worry about it skipping right through the process if you do have null data going through. So that can be potentially useful there. Let me just go ahead and throw this folder back in here just so that it works. The other thing then that's useful that may be important to note is on objects, we cannot use the constant option. So if I want to select constant, you'll notice this, that I won't actually be able to edit or adjust anything. It'll tell you that the object cannot be picked, parameterless constructor is not found. When you have the object data type like this here, then you will be able to send in anything into it, but you can't set that as a constant. So if you have some kind of constant data, or you know that it's going to be the same every time, or maybe you're just doing this using it for testing and you want to set some constant object just to test and set up your items, you do need to create that constant or create some kind of value beforehand. So that's why I have create data here to set my constant folder and not on this step, because I can't actually use constant. I need to set this up somewhere previously. If that's constant, that's okay. That doesn't matter. I can set it up previously on something else, set that data, and output your object here. And then I can select from flow to grab the other objects, not the other way around. I can't set up the constant value on this object. So it's just something that's important to note, mostly for people that are trying to do testing, or if you do know that you're going to have the same thing coming through every time, that must be set beforehand. We cannot use constant on objects. This will conclude our video over the get property names on object step, and hopefully this gives you some good insight on how this step can work. Thank you for watching.